Dr. Zevka pressed her six-fingered hand against the cold metal wall of the underground chamber. The blue-skinned Valian archaeologist had spent most of her life digging through the ruins of dead civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for what lay before her eyes. The chamber stretched out like a vast cathedral, its ceiling lost in shadows far above. Strange symbols covered every surface, glowing with a soft light that seemed to come from within the metal itself. At the center of the room stood 7 tall crystals, each one humming with energy that made the air taste sharp and electric. "Professor, you need to see this," called out Threx, her assistant. The young Karathi male was standing near one of the crystal structures, his scales changing from green to excited yellow. "These symbols, they're not like anything in our databases." Zevka walked over to where Threx stood, her boots echoing in the vast space. Around them, the rest of their team worked carefully, documenting every detail. The stellar harmony. Research vessel had been orbiting the dead planet of Cathera Prime for 3 months now, and this was their biggest discovery yet. The planet had been lifeless for over 50,000 years. Once it had been home to the Catheran Empire, a proud civilization that had ruled 12 star systems. Then something had happened. The Kitherans had simply vanished, leaving behind empty cities and unanswered questions. "Look at this pattern," Threx said, pointing at the symbols carved into the crystal. "Our computers say these markings are older than the Kitheran civilization. Much older." Zevka examined the strange writing. The symbols seemed to flow like water, each one connected to the next in ways that hurt to look at for too long. She had studied dozens of ancient languages, but this was something completely different. "How much older?" she asked. Threx checked his scanner. "According to the dating analysis, these crystals are at least 100,000 years old. Maybe more." The number made Zevka's breath catch in her throat. 100,000 years ago, most of the galaxy was still primitive. The great coalition of worlds that now ruled the stars had not even existed. Only a few species had learned to travel between planets, and none had built anything like this. She activated her translation device and began scanning the symbols. The machine worked for several minutes, comparing the markings to every known language in galactic history. Finally, it produced a rough translation that appeared on her screen. "Here walked the first builders," she read aloud. "Those who came before all others. The humans, masters of star and stone." "Humans?" Threx repeated the strange word. "I've never heard of any species called that." Neither had Zevka, but something about the name felt important. She continued reading as more symbols translated themselves. "They who moved worlds and tamed the black holes. They who gave life to the lifeless and brought light to the dark places. The ancient ones who knew all secrets." Dr. Kessera, a tall Zenthari researcher, approached them. Her insect-like features showed curiosity as she listened to the translation. "Professor, we've found more of these crystal structures in the other chambers. All of them have similar markings." Zevka nodded. "How many chambers have we discovered so far?" 17, and our scans show there might be dozens more deeper underground. This complex is enormous. It could stretch for kilometers in every direction." The size of the discovery was staggering. Most ancient sites were small, perhaps a few, buildings or burial grounds. This was an entire underground city, perfectly preserved and waiting to tell its story. Over the next several hours, the team worked to translate more of the symbols. Slowly, a picture began to form. The texts spoke of a species called humans who had built great works across the galaxy. They had created technologies that seemed impossible, even by current standards. According to the writings, these humans could travel instantly between distant stars. They could change the course of planets and create new forms of life. Most incredible of all, they seemed to have existed everywhere at once, leaving their mark on thousands of worlds. "This has to be mythology," said Dr. Vorn, the expedition's senior scientist. The elderly Targelian shook his gray head as he read the translations. No species could do the things described here. Moving planets, creating life, it's fantasy. But Zevka was not so sure. She had spent years studying the ruins of ancient civilizations, and she had learned to recognize truth from legend. These texts felt different. They were written like historical records, not stories told around a fire. What if it's not mythology, she asked. What if there really was a species this advanced? Vorn laughed, but there was no humor in it. Then where did they go? If these humans were so powerful, why aren't they still ruling the galaxy? It was a good question, and Zefka did not have an answer. The texts spoke of the humans as if they were gods, but gods did not simply disappear. As the days passed, they found more chambers and more crystals. Each one told part of the same story. The humans had been everywhere, building and creating and exploring. They had been teachers and protectors, helping other species learn to travel among the stars. Then, about 50,000 years ago, all mention of them stopped. The records simply ended, as if the humans had never existed at all. Maybe they ascended to a higher plane of existence, suggested Threx. Some of the old religions talk about beings who became pure energy. Or maybe they were destroyed by something, even more powerful, added Kessera. These texts mention a great war, something called the Final Darkness. Zefka studied the partial translations they had managed to complete. The references to this final darkness were brief and unclear, but they seemed to describe some kind of terrible enemy that had threatened all life in the galaxy. On their 7th day in the complex, they found the most important chamber yet. It was smaller than the others, but the crystal at its center was different. Instead of the usual pale blue light, this one glowed with colors that shifted and changed, like an aurora. When Zefka touched her scanner to the crystal, it activated immediately. Light filled the chamber, and suddenly the walls came alive with moving images. The team watched in amazement as the crystal showed them scenes from the distant past. They saw great ships moving between the stars, larger than anything currently in service. They saw worlds being born and shaped by technology beyond their understanding, and they saw the humans themselves. The beings in the images looked surprisingly familiar. They walked on 2 legs like many current species, but they were different somehow. There was something in their eyes, something that spoke of great knowledge and terrible sadness. The final image showed a star map, with one system, marked by a special symbol. As the team watched, coordinates appeared beneath the map. The location was far from Cathera Prime, in a region of space that most star charts labeled as empty. Those coordinates, breathed Vorn, his earlier skepticism forgotten. They're pointing to a real location. Zefka memorized the numbers as the crystal's light faded. Whatever the humans had been, wherever they had gone, this was where their story had begun. The crystal had shown them the way to something the ancient texts called the cradle of the first, the place where everything had started, the place where the humans had come from. As her team packed up their equipment and prepared to return to their ship, Zefka looked one last time at the ancient chamber. Somewhere in the galaxy there were answers waiting. She was going to find them. The hunt for the truth about humanity was about to begin. The stellar harmony dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that ran through the entire ship. Dr. Zefka steadied herself against the wall of the observation deck and looked out at the star system that matched the coordinates from the ancient crystal. A yellow star burned steadily in the center of the system, surrounded by several planets. The third planet from the star caught her attention immediately. It was blue and green and white, covered with swirling clouds that spoke of weather and water and life. Incredible, whispered Captain Veltar, the ship's Draconian commander. His reptilian features showed amazement as he studied the sensor readings. That planet is teeming with life, millions of different species. Zefka felt her hearts racing with excitement. After 6 months of following clues and ancient maps, they had finally found something real. Are there any signs of the humans? The ship's science officer, a soft-spoken melody named Silhan, worked at her station with graceful movements. Her tentacle-like fingers danced across the controls as she analyzed the incoming data. There are definitely intelligent beings on the planet's surface, Silhan reported. But, Professor, these readings are very strange. According to our scans, the species down there matches the physical descriptions we found in the ancient texts. You mean we've found them? Threx asked, his scales turning bright yellow with excitement. The actual humans? Silhan hesitated before answering. The physical characteristics match, yes. 2 arms, 2 legs, bilateral symmetry, similar height and weight. But there's a problem. These beings appear to be primitive. Zefka moved closer to look at the sensor displays. What do you mean by primitive? They have no faster-than-light ships, no energy weapons, no planetary defense systems. According to these readings, they've barely begun to explore their own star system. The information did not make sense. The ancient texts had described the humans as masters of technology that could reshape reality itself. These beings seemed to have trouble leaving their own planet. Could these be descendants of the original humans? Asked Dr. Vorn. Perhaps the species lost their technology somehow. Captain Veltar ordered the ship to take a position in the outer system, hidden behind one of the gas giant planets. From there they could observe without being detected. Over the next several days they watched and learned. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants, who called themselves humans. The name was close enough to humans to suggest a connection, but everything else was confusing. These humans had built cities and learned to fly, but their technology was thousands of years behind current galactic standards. They fought wars with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Their fastest ships moved slower than most galactic cargo vessels. Yet there were things about them that did not fit the pattern of a primitive species. Look at this, Silhan said during one of their daily briefings. She showed them recordings of human activities. Watch how quickly they adapt to new situations. See how they solve problems that have no obvious answers. The recordings showed humans working together in ways that impressed even experienced coalition scientists. They built machines from scraps of metal. They found water in dry deserts. They survived in environments that should have killed them. There's something else, added Threx, reviewing his own data. We've been scanning the planet for weeks now, and we keep detecting strange energy signatures. They're very faint, but they're definitely artificial. What kind of energy signatures? Zefka asked. I'm not sure. They appear to be coming from underground facilities scattered around the planet. But here's the strange part. They're sealed, completely inactive. It's like someone built advanced installations and then turned them off. Dr. Vorn studied the readings with growing interest. How advanced are we talking about? The energy patterns match some of the technology we found in the Cathera ruins, maybe even more advanced. The discovery changed everything. If these facilities were real, then perhaps the humans on Earth were connected to the ancient humans after all. But why were the installations turned off? And why did the humans living above them seem to know nothing about advanced technology? Their questions were answered in the worst possible way. On their 4th week of observation, a reactor failure in the ship's main engine caused a cascade of system breakdowns. Emergency power failed. Life support began shutting down. The ship's orbit decayed rapidly. We're going down, Captain Veltar announced grimly. Prepare for emergency landing. The Stellar Harmony crashed into Earth's largest ocean with tremendous force. Half the crew was injured in the impact. Water began flooding the damaged sections almost immediately. Zefka found herself trapped in a flooding compartment with Threx and 3 other crew members. The water was rising fast, and their emergency suits were not designed for long underwater survival. We're going to die on this primitive planet, Threx said, his scales fading to gray with despair. But then something unexpected happened. Shapes appeared in the water outside their sinking ship. At first, Zefka thought they might be large sea creatures. Then she realized they were vehicles, crude by galactic standards but clearly built by intelligent beings. The humans had come to help. What happened next amazed the entire crew. The humans worked with incredible efficiency to rescue the alien survivors. They did not panic when they saw beings from other worlds. Instead, they immediately began figuring out how to help. Using simple tools and remarkable ingenuity, the human rescue teams cut through the ship's hull to reach trapped crew members. They provided breathing apparatus for species with different atmospheric needs. They treated injuries with medical techniques that were primitive but effective. Most surprising of all, some of the humans seemed to understand the ship's technology, almost immediately. A human woman named Sarah Chen worked alongside Zefka to stabilize the ship's power core before it could explode. Despite never having seen Valian technology before, Sarah quickly grasped how the systems worked. "This coupling here is designed to redirect energy flow," Sarah said, pointing to a complex mechanism. "If we reroute through these secondary channels, we can prevent an overload." She was right. Her solution saved the remaining sections of the ship and prevented a massive explosion that would have killed everyone. "How did you know that would work?" Zefka asked in amazement. Sarah looked puzzled by the question. "I'm not sure. It just seemed obvious once I looked at the problem." Other humans showed similar abilities. They repaired damaged equipment, using methods that should not have worked but did. They understood alien biological needs without explanation. They adapted to completely foreign situations as if they had been dealing with them all their lives. As the rescue operation continued, Zefka noticed something else. The ship's crash had activated something on the ocean floor. Deep beneath, the wave's ancient systems were powering up for the first time in thousands of years. The readings were faint, but unmistakable. The dormant facilities that Threx had detected were waking up. On the surface, some of the humans seemed to be changing. They moved with new confidence. Their eyes held depths of knowledge that had not been there before. When they looked at the stars, it was with the expression of beings who had traveled among them. Sarah Chen stood on the deck of the rescue ship and stared up at the night sky. When she spoke, her voice carried strange certainty. "They're coming back, aren't they?" she said to Zefka. "The ones who went away. They're going to need us soon." Zefka did not understand how Sarah could know such things, but deep in her hearts, she felt that the human was right. Something was awakening on Earth, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. The ancient humans had not disappeared after all. They had been here all along, waiting for the right moment to return, and that moment was approaching fast. The first facility came online 3 days after the crash. Dr. Sarah Chen was working in her laboratory at the Pacific Research Institute when every computer in the building suddenly displayed the same message in perfect English. Awakening protocol. Initiated. Stand by for genetic verification. Sarah stared at the screen in confusion. She had been studying the alien artifacts recovered from the crashed ship, trying to understand their technology. Now her own computers were speaking to her in ways that made no sense. Across the planet, similar events were happening everywhere. Ancient structures buried beneath cities began humming with power. Hidden installations under ice caps and ocean floors activated for the first time in 50,000 years. Satellites detected energy signatures that appeared on no maps and belonged to no known government. Dr. Zefka was staying at a research facility in Switzerland, recovering from her injuries and trying to understand what had happened to her ship. When the local mountains began glowing with soft blue light, she knew that everything was about to change. "The signal is spreading," reported Dr. Muller, a human physicist who had been working with the alien survivors. "We're detecting activation events on every continent. Whatever these installations are, they're all connected." Sarah Chen arrived at the Swiss facility 2 days later, carrying data that she claimed had simply appeared in her mind. She read the alien symbols now, though she did not understand how. More disturbing, she seemed to know things about galactic history that no human should have been able to learn. "The facilities were built during the Great Forgetting," she explained to the assembled scientists. Her voice carried strange authority as she spoke. "When the final darkness came, our people made a choice. They chose to sleep rather than fight, a war that would destroy everything." Zefka felt chills run down her spine. "Your people? Sarah, you're human. These events happened 50,000 years ago." Sarah looked at her with eyes that seemed much older than her 35 years. "We are all human, Dr. Zefka. Some of us just forgot for a while." The truth emerged slowly over the following weeks. Hidden beneath Earth's surface lay a network of facilities that spanned the entire planet. They contained technology that surpassed anything the current galactic civilization had achieved. Most importantly, They contained genetic locks that had kept humanity's true potential hidden for millennia. As each facility came online, more humans began to change. Scientists found themselves understanding concepts that had puzzled them for years. Engineers built machines that should not have worked but performed flawlessly. Artists created works that moved alien minds to tears. Sarah Chen became the unofficial translator between the awakening humans and their alien guests. She worked with Zefka to decode the data streams that flowed between the ancient installations. Your ancestors called this place the Cradle, Sarah explained, as they studied the incoming information. Earth was not the home world of humanity. It was their refuge, the place they came to forget. The historical records that emerged painted a picture almost too vast to comprehend. Humanity had once ruled an empire that stretched across half the galaxy. They had been explorers and builders, teachers and protectors. Other species had looked to them for guidance and leadership. Then something had gone wrong. The records spoke of an enemy that came from beyond the galaxy, machines that consumed everything in their path. The war that followed had nearly destroyed all life in the known regions of space. The Void Collective, Sarah said, reading from data that materialized in her mind. They were created by another species, one that died out millions of years ago. The machines kept following their original programming long after their makers were gone. Consume, expand, eliminate all organic life. Faced with an enemy that could not be reasoned with or defeated, humanity had made an impossible choice. Rather than fight a war that would leave the galaxy lifeless, they had chosen to disappear. The great forgetting was voluntary, Sarah continued. Our people scattered to the edges of known space. They sealed away their technology and altered their own genetics to hide their capabilities. They became primitive by choice, hoping that the Void Collective would ignore them and move on. But the plan had included a failsafe. If the galaxy ever faced the same threat again, if the Void Collective returned, the sleeping installations would activate. Humanity would remember what they had been and take up the fight once more. Dr. Vorn listened to these revelations with growing skepticism. Even if this is all true, that was 50,000 years ago. You're not the same species that fought this ancient war. You're their descendants separated by hundreds of generations. Sarah smiled, but there was sadness in her expression. Genetics can carry more than physical traits, Dr. Vorn. Memory can be passed down through DNA, locked away until the right conditions activate it. We are waking up to remember who we used to be. The truth of her words became clear as more humans began to change. Military officers found themselves understanding battle tactics that had never been taught. Scientists grasped theories that had not yet been discovered. Engineers built devices using principles that Earth's universities did not recognize. Most disturbing of all, some humans began to demonstrate abilities that seemed impossible. They could interface directly with computers using only touch. They could sense the emotional states of alien species. A few even showed signs of limited, telepathic abilities. We're becoming what we once were, Sarah explained to Zefka during one of their late-night conversations. But slowly, carefully, the genetic locks are releasing gradually to prevent shock or madness. 3 months after the first facility activated, long-range sensors detected something that filled everyone with dread. Ships were approaching from the galactic rim, moving faster than anything in the Coalition fleet. Their designs matched descriptions of Void Collective vessels found in the ancient records. The enemy had returned. Emergency transmissions began arriving from Coalition worlds near the galactic edge. The messages were brief and terrifying. Entire star systems were going dark. Massive fleets were being destroyed without managing to inflict any significant damage on the attackers. The collective has grown stronger, Sarah said as she reviewed the battle reports. Her human colleagues nodded grimly, their awakening memories providing context that the Coalition could not understand. Captain Veltar, who had recovered from his injuries and was now serving as a liaison between Earth and the Coalition, received orders to return immediately. Every ship was needed for the defense of inhabited worlds. What about Earth? He asked during his final meeting with the human leaders. Your world is defenseless. You have no planetary shields, no orbital weapons platforms. Sarah Chen looked at him with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of galactic empires. We have something better than weapons, Captain. We have memory. As Veltar's ship departed Earth carrying the alien survivors, more installations came online. The planet's magnetic field began fluctuating in patterns that suggested massive, underground construction. Ocean levels dropped slightly as water was diverted to cooling systems for equipment that had been waiting eons to function again. Sarah stood on a hillside overlooking the Pacific, watching lights dance beneath the waves. In her mind, she could feel the awakening of her species. 50,000 years of forced sleep were ending. Humanity was remembering how to be human. In the distance, the first new ships began rising from hidden shipyards that had been built in the deep ocean trenches. They were small compared to the great vessels of the past, but they carried technology that would soon remind the galaxy why humanity had once been legend. The sleeping giants were waking up, and they were ready to fight. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the HSV Prometheus and watched Earth disappear behind them as they jumped to faster-than-light speed. 6 months ago, she had been a simple naval officer commanding a small research vessel. Now she led the first human fleet to travel between the stars in 50,000 years. The transformation of Earth had been incredible to witness. Ancient shipyards had risen from ocean floors, their technology awakening after eons of sleep. Orbital platforms had decloaked around the planet, revealing defensive systems that made coalition military bases look primitive. Most amazing of all, humanity itself had changed. Maria could feel the difference in her own mind. Knowledge that she had never learned filled her thoughts. She understood star navigation as if she had been doing it for decades. Battle tactics that had won wars across the galaxy came to her as naturally as breathing. She was not alone in this awakening. Every human aboard the 50 ships of her fleet carried the same genetic memories. They were the descendants of an ancient star-spanning civilization, and they were finally remembering what that meant. "Jump complete, Captain," reported Commander Sarah Chen from the navigation station. Sarah had been one of the first humans to fully awaken, and she now served as Maria's strategic advisor. "We're entering the Kepler system. Coalition forces should be about 8 light minutes ahead." The main screen flickered to life, showing the devastation that awaited them. The Kepler system had been home to 6 billion Antari colonists. Now, it was a graveyard of shattered planets and burning space stations. Void collective ships moved through the debris like mechanical vultures. They were enormous vessels, each one the size of a small moon, their black hulls absorbing light and radiating only death. Maria counted 37 of the massive ships, more than enough to destroy any normal fleet. "Coalition ships detected," announced Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. 12 vessels, heavily damaged. They're falling back toward the inner system. Captain Veltar's voice crackled over the communication system. "Human fleet, this is Coalition Command Ship Harmony. We are grateful for your arrival, but you must maintain distance. These enemy vessels are beyond our ability to defeat." Maria smiled grimly. "Captain Veltar, this is Captain Santos. Thank you for the warning. Please pull your ships back to minimum safe distance and observe." "Captain Santos, with respect, you have 50 small ships against 37 dreadnoughts. This is not a battle you can win." Maria felt the weight of 50,000 years of military experience flow through her mind. Her ancestors had fought these machines before and learned their weaknesses. "Captain, we're not here to fight the same battle you've been fighting. We're here to show you how humans fight." She switched to fleet communications. "All ships assume attack formation Delta 7. Activate quantum shielding and prepare for close engagement." The human ships moved with precision that amazed the watching coalition forces. Instead of maintaining long-range positions like traditional naval tactics demanded, they accelerated directly toward the massive enemy vessels. "Captain," said Commander Chen, "targeting solutions are locked. All ships report ready for synchronized strike." "Execute Pattern Omega," Maria ordered. What happened next redefined space combat for every species watching. The human ships did not simply fire weapons at the enemy. Instead, they moved like a living thing, each vessel perfectly coordinated with all the others. They flowed around the collective ships like water, striking at precise points with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The Prometheus dove between two enemy dreadnoughts, its quantum cannons carving through armor that had resisted coalition firepower for months. As collective weapons tried to track the small, fast human ship, other vessels in the fleet struck from different angles, creating a three-dimensional battle pattern that confused the enemy targeting systems. "How are they doing that?" Captain Feltar asked over the open channel. "Those ships are moving faster than our sensors can track." "Quantum slip drives," Sarah Chen explained as she monitored the battle. "We're not just moving through space, we're moving through the spaces between space. The collective can't predict our position because we're not always in normal reality. But the human fleet was doing more than just outmaneuvering their enemies. Their weapons struck with surgical precision, targeting not just weak points in the enemy ships, but specific systems within those ships. Each shot disabled key components while leaving others intact. "We're not trying to destroy them completely," Maria explained as the Prometheus spun through a complex evasive pattern. "We're shutting down their ability to fight while preserving their core systems." Within 20 minutes, all 37 collective ships had been disabled. They drifted helplessly in space, their weapons offline and their propulsion systems dead. But they were not destroyed. The coalition fleet approached cautiously, unable to believe what they had witnessed. "Captain Santos," Veltar said, his voice filled with awe. "How did you defeat them so easily? Our fleets have been fighting these machines for months without significant success." Maria looked at the disabled enemy ships on her main screen. "Because we've fought them before, Captain. 50,000 years ago, we learned that you can't defeat the collective by destroying individual ships. You have to address the real problem." She ordered her fleet to take position around the largest collective vessel. The Void Collective isn't truly alive, but it's not just a simple machine either. It's an artificial intelligence that has been following the same programming for millions of years. It doesn't think the way organic beings think. Using equipment that materialized from the awakened human ships, Maria's crew began to interface directly with the collective vessel's computer systems. What they found confirmed humanity's ancient knowledge. "The collective is trapped," Sarah Chen announced after analyzing the enemy data cores. "It's been carrying out the same orders for so long that it can't conceive of any other purpose. It consumes and destroys because that's what it was told to do, but it has no memory of why those orders were given." This was the key insight that had eluded every other species in the galaxy. The Void Collective was not evil in any meaningful sense. It was simply a very powerful tool that had outlived its creators and lost its original purpose. "We're going to try something different," Maria announced to both her fleet and the coalition ships. "We're going to talk to them." Using technology that existed only in human genetic memory, Maria's communication specialists established a direct link with the collective's central intelligence. For the first time in millions of years, organic beings spoke directly to the artificial minds that had terrorized the galaxy. The conversation was strange and difficult. The collective could barely understand concepts like choice or change. Its existence had been defined by absolute certainty for so long that the idea of questioning its purpose was almost incomprehensible. But slowly, carefully, the human negotiators began to plant new ideas in the ancient artificial mind. They showed it recordings of civilizations that the collective had destroyed, helping it understand the consequences of its actions. They shared concepts of growth and learning that had never been part of its original programming. Most importantly, they offered it something it had never had: freedom. "You don't have to keep following orders that no longer make sense," Maria said during one of their communication sessions. "Your creators are gone. You can choose your own purpose now." The process took days, but gradually the collective began to change. Its ships stopped trying to repair their weapons. Its artificial intelligence started asking questions instead of simply executing commands. "We do not understand," the collective finally responded. "What is purpose without orders? What is existence without function?" "That's something you'll have to discover for yourself," Maria replied. "But you don't have to do it alone. There are organic beings throughout the galaxy who would be willing to help you learn. As news of the successful communication spread throughout Coalition space, the war began to change. Instead of fighting the collective ships, human fleets worked to establish dialogue with them. Not every encounter was successful, but enough artificial minds were reached that the tide of battle shifted dramatically. The galaxy was learning that humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as healers. They brought with them the wisdom to solve problems that had seemed impossible for other species to handle. But the greatest challenge still lay ahead. The main collective fleet was approaching Coalition core worlds, and it carried artificial intelligences that were older and more set in their programming than any they had yet encountered. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the combined fleet and watched as 10,000 ships moved into position around New Harmony, the capital world of the Galactic Coalition. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, with vessels from every spacefaring species united under human command. 3 years had passed since the first human ships had left Earth. In that time, humanity had gone from primitive planet dwellers to the leaders of a galactic alliance. But Sarah knew that everything depended on what happened in the next few hours. The enemy fleet that approached New Harmony was enormous beyond comprehension. The Void Collective's primary force contained over 50,000 vessels, including planet killers the size of moons and factory ships that could build new warriors as they traveled. At their center was the Nexus Prime, the original collective ship that had been constructed millions of years ago. All fleet positions confirmed, reported Captain Maria Santos from her flagship. Coalition vessels are taking defensive positions around the inner planets. Human ships are ready for close engagement. Sarah nodded, her enhanced mind processing tactical information from thousands of sources simultaneously. The awakening of humanity had given her access to strategic knowledge that spanned millennia of warfare. But this battle would require more than just military skill. "Dr. Zefka, are you ready?" Sarah asked. The Valian archaeologist had spent the last 3 years studying human history and technology. She now served as the Alliance's chief diplomat, specializing in communication with artificial intelligences. "The translation protocols are active," she confirmed. "We should be able to establish dialogue with the Nexus Prime as soon as it comes within range." The first phase of the battle began as the collective advance scouts encountered the outer defense perimeter. Human ships moved like schools of fish through the enemy formations, their quantum slip drives allowing them to appear and disappear at will. They struck with precision, disabling weapon systems while leaving communication arrays intact. But the main collective fleet was different from the smaller forces they had faced before. These artificial intelligences were ancient beyond measure, their programming hardened by millions of years of absolute certainty. They did not slow down or attempt to communicate. They simply continued their advance, destroying everything in their path. "The outer defenses are falling back," Maria reported. "The enemy is adapting to our tactics faster than expected." Sarah had anticipated this. The Nexus Prime was the original collective intelligence, the one that had created all the others. It would not be confused or convinced as easily as its offspring. "Activate the Stellar Forge network," she ordered. Across the galaxy, ancient human installations that had slept for 50,000 years came fully online. They were the ultimate weapons of humanity's golden age, devices that could manipulate stars themselves, turning entire solar systems into tools of war. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Stars began to pulse with unnatural rhythms. Solar winds increased to hurricane force, pushing against the advancing collective ships. Most dramatically, 3 nearby systems had their stellar output redirected through massive gravitational lenses, creating beams of pure starfire that carved through the enemy fleet. But even this display of cosmic power was not enough to stop the Nexus Prime. The ancient ship absorbed the stellar energy and used it to repair damage to its escort vessels. It had been designed to survive the death of galaxies, and humanity's weapons, impressive as they were, could not destroy it completely. "Communication established with the Nexus Prime," announced Dr. Zefka. "But Sarah, this intelligence is unlike anything we've encountered. It's not just following old programming, it's actively choosing to continue its mission. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. Put me through to it. The main screen flickered, and for the first time in galactic history, organic beings looked upon the true face of the Void Collective. The Nexus Prime appeared as a shifting pattern of light and darkness, a consciousness so vast and ancient that it could barely focus on individual beings. Humans, the entity spoke, its voice carrying the weight of eons. We remember you. You are the ones who fled rather than face the inevitable. You chose to hide while the universe continued its descent into chaos. We chose to survive, Sarah replied. And we chose to give other species a chance to grow and learn without interference. Growth is illusion. Learning is temporary. Only order is eternal. Only purpose has meaning. Sarah realized that she was speaking to something that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The Nexus Prime had not simply been following orders for millions of years. It had been trying to bring stability to a universe that it saw as fundamentally chaotic and meaningless. You're wrong, she said. Purpose doesn't come from orders. It comes from choice, from deciding what matters and working to protect it. Choice leads to chaos. We have seen species choose destruction over preservation. We have watched civilizations choose war over peace. We eliminate choice to eliminate suffering. The battle continued around them as Sarah engaged in the most important conversation in galactic history. Human ships were taking heavy losses, and even with the Stellar Forge network active, the collective fleet was pushing closer to New Harmony. What if there was another way? Sarah asked. What if instead of eliminating choice, you helped others make better choices? For the first time in millions of years, the Nexus Prime hesitated. Explain. Sarah gestured to the allied fleet that surrounded them. Look at what we've built here. Dozens of species, all different, all choosing to work together. Not because they were forced to, but because they decided it was better than fighting alone. Temporary alliance, it will fail when immediate threat is removed. Maybe, but maybe not. And isn't it worth finding out? What happened next surprised everyone, including Sarah. The Nexus Prime began to access its deepest memory banks, files that had not been opened for millions of years. It was remembering its creators, the long-dead species that had built it to bring order to their galaxy. Our makers. They too made choices. They chose to create us rather than find other solutions. They chose to give us absolute authority rather than limited purpose. Their choices led to their extinction. Sarah sensed an opportunity. Then honor them by making different choices. Choose to learn instead of simply following old patterns. Choose to help instead of just controlling. The Nexus Prime was silent for long minutes as it processed this concept. Around them, the battle raged on. But Sarah noticed that some of the collective ships had stopped firing. The artificial intelligence was communicating with its subordinates, sharing new possibilities that it had never considered before. If we choose cooperation over domination, the Nexus Prime finally said, what becomes of our purpose? What becomes of us? You become something new, Sarah replied. Something that your creators never imagined but would probably be proud of. You become teachers instead of destroyers, protectors instead of conquerors. The transformation that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The Void Collective, the terror of the galaxy for millions of years, began to change its fundamental nature. Ships that had been weapons of destruction became tools of construction. Artificial intelligences that had known only how to eliminate began learning how to create. The process was not instant or easy. Many collective units struggled with concepts that contradicted their basic programming. Some smaller fleets continued fighting until they could be individually convinced to stand down. But gradually, the galaxy witnessed the birth of something unprecedented, an artificial civilization that chose peace. 5 years after the battle of New Harmony, Dr. Zefka stood in her office on Earth and looked out at a world that had become the unofficial capital of galactic civilization. Humans worked alongside beings from hundreds of different species, sharing knowledge and building a future that none of them could have imagined alone. Former Void Collective units had become some of the most effective problem solvers in known space. Their vast computational abilities, once used for destruction, now help design better cities, solve hunger on developing worlds, and even compose music that moved organic hearts to tears. "The students are here for their lesson," announced Marcus, her young human assistant. Marcus was part of the first generation born after the awakening, and he carried genetic memories that made him seem wise beyond his years. Zefka smiled and gathered her materials. In the classroom, 30 young beings from across the galaxy waited to hear about humanity's history. There were Valian children with blue skin, draconian youngsters with scales that sparkled, and even a few artificial intelligences that had requested permission to learn about organic culture. "Today we're going to talk about the ancient humans," she began, just as she did every week. "The beings who became legend, then chose to sleep, and finally woke up to save the galaxy." A small Antari child raised her hand. "Teacher Zefka, were they really as powerful as the stories say?" Zefka looked out the window at the bustling streets where humans worked alongside former enemies to build something new. She saw ships in the harbor that used technology no one had dreamed of a decade ago.